Everyone to part 2 of From Sunset to Sunrise. We are here with Mark Frinku and Anna Himali, and we're going to start with a conversation about the sun, the planets, and whatever comes up. So I leave you with Anna and Mark.
Hello. Nice to be with you at 4 in the morning.
Morning.
Would you like to say a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yep. So I'm currently a lecturer at Nottingham Trent. I mostly teach computer science, but for the past 8 years or so, I've been involved in archaeoastronomy. So basically, studying how astronomy has impacted ancient cultures.
Archaeoastronomy.
Yes, that's correct.
Amazing. And I've got some questions from Edurne and Maria, but we'll also have a conversation. And I want to ask, for ancient cultures and prehistoric cultures, who or what did they think the sun was?
It's a very good question. It's kind of all life on Earth evolved around the sun and the moon, and it's in that sense the sun was thought to be as the creator of life together with Earth. So it's like Earth cannot be fertile without the sun heat, the sun rays. So it's like sun is the father and Earth is the mother of all things. And this is how basically it was perceived in ancient cultures as having an important part in the life cycle. And actually, it's if you go way back to prehistory, Earth was more important. So it was like it was basically the core of things, and the sun became important only later, let's say around Bronze Age. So when we first started building tools made of bronze, that's when the solar cult became predominant. So it's been an interesting evolution of our perception of the nature, I would say. So it was in prehistory. It was more, I would say, oriented towards the maternal lineage, Earth being equal to, let's say, mother, and later on it became more of a paternal focused. So with the sun being as the father. So yeah.
And obviously, we can't see the sun yet, but I think it will probably happen very quickly when it does. And was sunrise important in those cultures?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, it's we need to think as at the relationship that we had with nature, what we had as a means to survive, and at that. I mean, in ancient times, it was really we were depending on sunlight and sun, and also the moon during night time to survive. So this is why we started observing the sun and its patterns, and we started building the first calendars, and we noticed that the seasons kind of correlate with some important positions the sun has during sunrise and sunset as well. So we noticed that when summer comes, when spring comes, and later summer, the sun rises towards the north, so it approaches the solstice, the longest day of the year, and it moves. If you look at the horizon, you see it rising each day closer to the north. And as you go towards the winter solstice, and the days get shorter, it rises each day more towards the south. And this was really important. So they were focused on watching the sunrise to understand or to see where they are in the year, and what they can plan. So, for instance, if they should start planting or preparing for winter, gathering supplies and all of that. So it was really important from that perspective for ancient people.
And were there any sunrise-based rituals or anything?
Yes, yeah, and many of those celebrations still transcend till our days. We have many festivals around the solstices, for the summer, and for the winter as well. And it's all of these basically have their roots, especially the ones in Christianity. They have their roots in ancient pagan cults and traditions. So we have the midsummer festivals with the fairies and all that, which are linked with the summer solstice, and then we have the rebirth of nature. In Roman times, we had Sol Invictus, which is now linked to Christmas. So we have all these special events, which kind of mark the two most important, I would say, periods around the year, the solstices. They were very important, and actually, if you look at these colors in the sky, it's apparently in ancient Babylon, Sumeria, and all that, they kind of see these colors as a representation of various gods levels. So their universe is made of various layers. And for instance, you can only see certain layers where some powerful gods reside. You can only see them when you see at sunset or sunrise through these colors. So when you see the red color, it means that you see in the realm of the gods. And you can only see the red color of the sky at sunset or at sunrise. You cannot see during day. So they were seen as gateways towards these other layers of existence or deities.
So sunrise and sunset were like times to connect with that realm or to worship, or...
Yeah, exactly, and more importantly, around solstices. So this is something really important for ancient cultures. The solstices, because we have the solstices mark the days when the sun turns around. So solstice is from Latin, solstitium, so the sun stays still and then turns around. So basically the day increases up till the summer solstice in June, 2021, depends on the year. And then it starts to decrease till the summer, till the winter solstice on December 21st, about that time. So these two periods were seen as the actual gates to the underworld and the gods for our ancestors. So the winter solstice actually marks the rebirth of nature. So we have the winter solstice where we have the shortest day. I mean, you need to imagine. Nowadays we feel cozy in our warm homes. We don't bother about the cold weather outside. But in those days, you just had a fire, and if you're not by the fire, you kind of feel the cold. And it's imagine that you have in December around the winter solstice, you have about 17 hours of darkness, of cold. and imagine you have no moon on the sky to lit up, and it's basically it's all dark and cold. It feels like the end is coming to an end, and it's like you're just praying to whatever date you have, and waiting for the sunrise, hoping that it will all start again, and it does eventually. So there are many important celebrations related to rebirth and birth. So it's, for instance, Christmas is related to birth at that time. So it's basically derived from some prior ancient beliefs on that subject. So this is how they understood and they saw. They tried to find meaning basically in the events around them. It's pretty much like we do nowadays with science. They just didn't have science; they had faith and religion. So they just coped with whatever they had.
And in their science, what was the relationship between the Earth and the Sun?
It was a very human-centric, I would say, Earth-centric. So everything revolved around Earth. And if you think about it, it even transcends to our days. You say sun rises and sun sets. So you put the action on the sun. We are standing still. The sun is the one that's moving, even though we know that the Earth is rotating around the sun. But from our perspective, it's really hard to imagine otherwise. All of your senses tell you that you're fixed. You don't feel that you're moving in space. You just see the sun rise and the sun setting. So that was their belief back then. So everything was centered around us. And even in astronomy nowadays, we still have coordinates on the sky which are centered on Earth. So we still use that Earth-centric perspective even nowadays. So it's really difficult. And it actually took many years and lots of scientific results to understand that it's the other way around, that we are moving around the sun. And if you think about it, you need to go to school to understand that, right? But you don't need to go to school to understand that the sun is rising and the sun is setting. You see that, you observe that. So it's what your feelings are saying. And this is probably why it was difficult for many people for many thousands of years to change their perspective, to start thinking that no, we are the ones that are moving and the sun is fixed, because it contradicts our senses basically.
And how did that shift happen?
Well, it started about 400 years ago, so it's relatively new, given that humankind has been around for like 100,000 years or so, more or less. In the past 400 years, we started building telescopes and making observations, and all of that started to provide evidence of us being in an orbit around the sun, and the sun being in the center. And it wasn't something that happened instantly. It started with guys like Galileo and Kepler and Copernicus, but when they made their discoveries, those discoveries were not universally accepted. It took like 300 years, like up till the 19th century, when Neptune was discovered, so the outermost planet. When that planet was discovered based on the mathematical theory developed in the early 1600s, it's at that point that was the final proof that all right, that theory works better than the Earth-centric one. So yeah, it was definite proof that we are orbiting and not the sun.
Mm.
Do you think there would have been individuals or cultures that might have questioned in all the thousands of years before Galileo and wondered whether the Earth was moving around the sun?
Yep. We know at least of the ancient Greeks. So the ancient Greeks were the first ones that created geometrical models. So they were able to take the universe to a more abstract level. And in doing so, they imagined all sorts of models. And this was one of the models that they envisioned. Unfortunately, they had no proof. Again, the senses tell you otherwise. So we needed more time to get the proof, and that eventually happened with Galileo and the others.
And still, everything is a bit of a leap of faith in a way, because
Yeah. I mean, it is. Yes. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard because it kind of, it's against your common sense. It requires education. It requires a lot of things which, they're harder to achieve, I would say.
I was going to ask a similar question, which is like these ideas about the sun being the father and the earth being the mother, or these mythologies, were they sort of pretty universal across prehistoric and ancient cultures, or did they vary?
It's pretty much universal. I think throughout history and throughout cultures, most of them had this belief of Mother Earth, Father Sun. And a proof for that is the numerous constructs, megalithic monuments that they built and dedicated to this, and in a sense symbolizing the union between father and mother. A very nice example is, for instance, in Ireland at Newgrange, where you have this huge tomb which is aligned to the winter solstice, and it's basically it's gigantic, and it's 5,000 years old, and it's waterproof till today, so it's no water leaks inside the tomb after 5,000 years, and you have a long tunnel entrance towards in the tomb, and this is oriented towards the sunrise at winter solstice, and it's the only time of the year when light enters in the tomb. So it's like a symbol of the union between Father, Son, and Mother Earth. It's basically all boiling down to the fertility and fecundity cult, where you have Earth fertilized by the sun, and it's all around the world. So this kind of paints a picture about the universality of the things that happen around us.
So could you talk more about some of those monuments?
Sure. So we have a lot of in the British Isles. It's the megalithic culture was spread on the Atlantic coast. So there are numerous stone circles. We have Stonehenge, and in Scotland we also have up way in Orkney Islands some nice megaliths. In Wales we have also some nice tombs as well. all around the UK, Ireland, the coast of the Atlantic coast of France, Spain, Portugal. They're full of these monuments, which are basically um, their legacy to us, and a monument to their beliefs. And most of them have entrances or the major access. So if it's a building and it has it has walls, and the longest wall, it's usually oriented, or the entrance to the building, it faces solstices or moonrise, moonset. So it's a matter of statistics. It's basically, there are simply too many coincidences, just simply to be a coincidence. So it has to make sense. I mean, if you have too many things oriented towards a certain direction, it means that there must have been a purpose, and they must have watched something in that direction. Otherwise, it would be randomly, oriented and facing randomly points. So the megalithic culture in Western Europe, and of course you have the pyramids, which are incredibly aligned with the north, and they use the stars to do that. They actually proved it a couple of years back, so there was nothing mysterious about that. So they just used the stars to align it to the north, and they had no North Star. And then you have lots of temples in North America. You have the Incas in South America, Machu Picchu. It's a wonderful place also with a lot of alignments. And Asia, Cambodia has some nice places. Angkor Wat is one of them. So it's pretty much all around the world, and they date from the Neolithic, so like, I would say 10,000 years ago onwards.
And is there a clear idea of what they were doing in those? I mean, obviously, for what you're saying, it was mainly a ritual to do with that idea of the sun, the earth.
So they kind of group in different categories. So we have the tombs, dolmens, passage graves, like in Newgrange. So that's one category, and we also have the temples. So we know there were temples. We have Egyptian temples, Greek temples, even Roman temples, which were kind of aligned to these major points towards the sunrise and also sunset as well. So we have temples, we have tombs, and then we have strange things like stone circles, which we don't really know what was their purpose. But yeah, we kind of think that they are ritualistic places, some sort of temples where people gathered. And druids nowadays, or the followers, they usually gather there, but these are older than the druids themselves. So the druids appeared much later than the actual construction date.
Do we know how they built them?
Yes. So it's apparently, for instance, at Stonehenge, they brought the huge stones, the megaliths, by water. In ancient Egypt, they did the same. They just used the Nile. We actually have papyra, which depicts the boss running the boat, saying how he brings from somewhere up the river, how he brings the huge stones towards the construction site for the pyramids. And they basically used primitive tools like logs. They put the stones on huge logs, and then they just pushed them, and then it was a team effort. I mean, the whole community basically did this. It wasn't. It was a way of being, and this kind of brings me to something I witnessed a few years back. It was in Wyoming, in the U.S., and they have these huge medicine wheels. So they are Native American constructs, huge circles of stone with spikes, and they're called medicine wheels. And I was there for a sunrise, actually, a summer solstice sunrise, about 3,000 meters high, so it was quite chill, even in June. And there was this family of natives, and basically the father was telling the son, he was initiating him in a way in the place. He was telling his son that this is not a touristic attraction. This is our way of life, our way of being. So he was transmitting him his knowledge on the place, telling him that, all right, this is more than just an attraction. This is something that relates to the way that we, our beliefs, basically. So it was kind of moving. But yeah, I mean, it's many of these traditions still exist in many places.
How has science changed and shaped how we relate to the sky?
Well, it's. I would start by saying that I think there are two sides of the same coin: science and faith and spirituality. I wouldn't say religion. So it's they both try to explain the same thing. Science uses reason and proof. Spirituality is more about belief and what you feel, and it's probably sometimes it's better to mix them. I would say, just to have the broad picture, not to miss anything. I think it's also one of the main scientific, I would say, postulates. Just you basically need to look at all the options. So if you want to do that, you need to look at the belief as well as a possibility, as an explanation for what's happening. So yeah, I mean, it's science brought the world of mathematics, and it's kind of nicely arranged everything and explained how it moves, but it doesn't really explain the reason for it being that way. So we can answer questions like what, and but we cannot say why. You know, what's the true purpose behind it. You know, it's kind of this is something that science cannot really explain so far.
So do you think we're still looking for meaning in things like sunrises and solstices?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look at us. We are here. It's waking up at 3:30. So it's like a ritual. We are all part of a ritual. It's a ritual of the rising sun. So it's definitely something that owes us
But
to the day.
we don't necessarily see it so much now, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bit of an effort, and I guess before it was the thing probably. Like I think, for example, where I come from, the farms are always facing, so the front of the farms, they would always go to the east. So it's exactly, you know, and it probably has to do with agriculture and waking up to start to work with animals and everything. But for us now is an effort to actually you have to actually wake up at 3 at 3 in the morning to make it to see the sunrise. So in a way, maybe you are a bit more detached from all of those, things.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, it's. I guess it also has to do with our society and the way it runs. Um, in earlier cultures, probably people woke up at the dawn, and they started from there. So they didn't waste anything. Uh, yeah, so it's who knows.
Because they probably couldn't afford to waste light because they didn't
Exactly.
have as much artificial light.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's a good point.
And by 5, everyone was in bed.
Yeah, when it gets dark. We've gone from like a really deep red to a really pale pink, so it must be soon.
So the gates to the gods have closed.
They're closing.
Yeah, and it's basically it's about that. So the, the Babylonians had this model, I would say. It's kind of scientific in a way, where since you cannot see the gods directly, you can only see the stars, and the stars are basically like the words of the gods. And this is how astrology came into being, as a way of interpreting the will of the gods. So you cannot talk to the gods directly because they are somewhere up there and you can only see them at sunrise and sunset. But at night you have the stars and you have the shape of the stars and all that, and you have signs, comets and meteors and supernovas, and when they appear in a certain configuration, it must mean something because they are up there under the gods. So this is based on that. Eventually, people developed sophisticated theories on how the stars influence us based on the will of the gods, and it basically created astrology. But that astrology is different than modern day astrology. So we must not confuse the what we read in the newspaper today about Leo and Virgo and Taurus and all that as being identical with what the ancient Babylonians had. So that was completely different. They also had omens, but it was a different astrology.
A little bit of rain. Do you think the fact that we can't see the stars as strongly influences how much attention we pay to those beliefs, and like if we could see if they were as present for us as they were for those ancient cultures, would we have different beliefs?
It's hard to say. I would say that it's the way we look at the sky evolved as we evolved. It's if you go back when we were hunter gatherers, we had a different perception and a different understanding, and we were focused on the moon more because we were hunting at night, and the moon basically guided us. It was the only source of light, and then the sun became more important as we started cultivating things. And nowadays, I guess we don't really have that much time to watch the stars because our society makes us work all day, and it's basically we are too tired to stargaze or even to watch sunrises or sunsets. So it kind of it probably evolved as we did.
I'm going to check what time. I think we have about 10 minutes until
Until the sun
the
comes out.
moment. Yeah. So any other questions are very welcome.
I was wondering how ancient civilizations calculated these astronomic phenomena like so accurately, because I assume they didn't have like, you know, satellite clocks and stuff like that. So it always kind of boggles my mind, and because you know, if your life is like 50 years, you only see like 50 revolutions of the Earth around the sun. So how do you even calculate that? You know, the longest day of the year and the shortest day of the year is always at the same time, and how do you even calculate that years are 365 days long and stuff like that if you don't have the tools to calculate it and not that much time to observe it?
Yeah, it's something that puzzled me initially as well. Related to the moon, especially, it's easier for the sun. The moon is more challenging because it has cycles which take about 18 years to complete, and if the average lifespan of a Neolithic person was about 35 years, then if you missed it once, basically it's gone. That doesn't mean that they didn't have elderly people. They just didn't have as many as we do. It's for the sun it's easier because what they used was actually landmarks. Probably the first observations were done in places with some specific landscape near the horizon, where the mountains and the hills and maybe some trees act as markers. So let's say that maybe they watched today the sun rising from behind that hill, and then they realized after a while that it changes its position and it rises in different parts from different mountains, and at some point it returns to that place. And when they realized that they must have thought, all right, this is a pattern, this is a cycle, so it comes back. Or let's wait, does it happen again? So they waited and it happened again, and then they basically started counting the days, because the day was the unit of measure that was easily accessible for them. And basically it takes 365 days to get back to the same position, for the sunrise to be from behind that same mountain. And this is basically how you come up with the 365-day calendar. Of course, it doesn't, I mean, you don't succeed in the first try, you just need to do it all over again a couple of times, and basically it will give you the calendar.
I think we're actually very nearly. We're 3 minutes away
Are we?
from the sunrise. So most of the red has gone now, which we learnt the science about last night, but the symbolism of this morning.
I've got a question here from Edurne, actually,
Oh,
asking, where do you think the sun rises in December? Where the sun rises in December
compared to here.
compared to here.
Compared to here, it's probably more towards south, so it should be probably from
Oh,
that
that
direction.
make a difference?
Yeah, yeah. It's a big difference.
Wow.
It's a big difference.
Oh.
Yeah.
So of course you have to then be constantly, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of observation that you need to do to actually understand.
Yes.
The season.
Yeah.
Ah, I think when you explained that, I thought you meant like a little shift, but it's like
No, it's a huge jump. So it basically hops all the way. So in half a year it moves from there to there and back again there. So the whole movement is basically like 365 days. Of course, you don't really see the movement around solstices, hence their name, solstitium, the sun that stands still. During sunset, I was thinking about the sunset versus sunrise comparison, and I remember hearing somewhere that the sunrise, the sunset is just the sunrise seen from behind. So basically, it's our sunrise is someone else's sunset, and the other way around.
what was the difference between sunrise rituals and sunset rituals?
We don't really know. We don't really know, but it's probably the sunrise rituals are closely linked to the rebirth. As you have the sun moving from the underworld, because they didn't know where it was. They didn't have this concept of around Earth, and they just thought it went in the underworld and then it fights some demons or some creatures, and then it comes up victorious the next day. So it's basically about the victory of the sun and the rebirth.
But the sunset, yeah, of course, they didn't know where it had gone.
Yeah, it's probably the rituals maybe had to do with empowering the sun to fight the underworld creatures. We don't really know, though.
You can't see because you're seated, but it is just.
Is it just
It's just behind those cranes.
Sorry, I got excited. Yeah, it's now 5.
Oh my god, look at that!
We have to wait because we're sitting down. Feels like a big. It's only that's like a 3-foot difference, but we're getting a different
Yep.
experience.
Going into the cloud.
Do you think was the summer solstice more significant because you're more likely to be able to see it, or were they equally significant, the summer and the winter solstice?
I think they serve different purposes, so probably they were equally important. But I guess the impact was more powerful in December for the same reason. Cold, dark, just waiting for the sun after 17 hours to rise and warm you.
And was the summer solstice a kind of, comparatively a kind of mourning, or like saying goodbye?
It was related to summer festivities, so basically celebrating summer. So that was its purpose.
So they both get to be celebrations?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think we're just seeing the reflection on the clouds. So it's not there yet. It's
But gradually the effect of, because everything was a silhouette when we got here, and now we're slowly starting to be able to see. It's interesting that the geese had that very big moment just as the sun rose.
I've got a question about archaeoastronomy, because for me it's a very new. So I was wondering, what is exactly that? How do you accomplish, investigating, or what is the kind of areas that you look at, or what? Because it sounds like a mix of different things, isn't it? That you need to kind of look at.
Well, it's kind of, you need to look at everything, really. So you look at the archaeology. Whoa, that's nice. Yeah.
There it is.
They're all coming now. The birds, suddenly they're all coming.
It's time to wake up if you're a bird.
But they don't seem to be paying any attention, particularly to the sun, the moment. They're not seeing what it is.
Wow, look at that.
If anything, they've all just immediately started eating. And soon it will get too bright to look at, right? So I guess that's also, it's like a small window of time when you can look at the sun.
Yeah.
It does feel like more of an event than the sunset because it's so quick. For me.
Yeah, it just appears and then all of a sudden it's up.
Yeah, like the sunset is very meditative, but the sunrise is like quite showbiz.
It's like, all right, let's get these guys warm up, and it's quickly. And you see the nice pillar of light reflecting down the lake. It also can happen upwards, so you can actually see a reflection on the clouds. And you can see circles, you can see so-called sun dogs, which are fake suns, which appear around the circle, around the sun. So you can see 3 suns or 4. If you have ice crystals in the upper atmosphere, if it's, but it needs to be, I would say, clear sky. And it's basically, people have seen that, and you have all sorts of ornaments with that in the Bronze Age, in the Neolithic, depicting multiple suns or pillars or things like this, which they've seen happening at sunset or sunrise, and then they put it in artwork.
And is that the only form, or were there more forms of art about the sun?
Well, I mean, it's pretty much, it was down to the imagination of whoever did it.
So they were sort of making sculptures about what they'd seen.
Sculptures, carvings on vases, paintings, pretty much everything.
And why do you think they made them?
Well, I guess initially as a sign of worship, and then it gradually turned into symbolism, representing something, maybe the power of the sun, and then it basically just became an ornament. I guess people just forgot its initial purpose and just used it because it looked nice. I mean, your earrings are also sun-shaped, and it's probably the artist just saw the sun as an interesting motive,
Yeah.
without any particular meaning.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like we've experienced a bit of what you're talking about. Obviously, because we're in a city, it's like a lower version, but like of there being just a flurry of life immediately as soon as the sun comes up with the birds. Do you think it felt like a surprise every time?
It feels like it, doesn't it? We depend on it. It's, if it goes away, we are gone. So it's kind of makes sense that it's been celebrated throughout history.
Did people make the connection between the sun and heat pretty early?
Probably, I would say. Yeah, definitely. Especially in winter.
Amazing rays of light coming up through the clouds. Like you
It's
can
a nice.
see it.
Yeah, I mean it's a nice game of shadows, and it's basically how the clouds are and how the sunlight basically comes through. It's stopped in some places, and in others it's basically it finds holes and it basically shines. It like it has rays, doesn't it?
Yeah. Sort of similar to the sunset last night with the split rays.
But the feeling is a bit different. It's pretty much the same thing reversed, but it gives you a different feeling, and I don't know. It's different. It feels different than the sunset.
Oh yeah, that feels warm.
It's like an eye, just watching, staring at us.
I was going to say it's like an egg.
Egg. Yeah.
Like the yolk.
Yeah.
The yolk.
Maybe you're just hungry.
Yeah. Haven't had breakfast yet, to be fair.
Apparently, we don't see as many clear sunrises as before, due to change in climate and all. It was clearer in Neolithic than it is now. The weather has changed, especially at solstices in the winter. It's more foggy and cloudy. Before it was clearer.
Is this a result of like pollution and climate change, or is it just natural?
Probably climate change. when the sun is that close to the horizon, you can actually estimate time easily. You just see how many times your 4 fingers fit between the sun and the horizon, and basically that tells you how many hours you have till sunset or since sunset. So now it's just 1 finger of mine, maybe for you as well, because it's the same thing. It doesn't matter who's looking, the perspective is the same. As long as you're looking at your own palm. So
we know it's 1
it's
hour.
basically 15, 4 fingers is like 60 minutes. So 1 finger is like 15. So it's been like 15 minutes, more or less. But yeah, it's if you don't have a clock or anything, you can just, okay, how many hours till sunset? About 3 hours. The victorious sun from the underworld.
Well, now that it's disappeared behind the cloud,